Rivers took over Milwaukee during the 2023 season after the team fired Adrian Griffin midway. Now, Rivers took the Bucks to the playoffs twice, but never won a playoff series. And this year, Milwaukee lost 50 games for the first time since Giannis Antetokounmpo's rookie season in 2013. And for more on this development, we bring in CBS Sports NBA analyst John Gonzalez. And John, Doc Rivers out as the Bucks head coach. For me, I'm not really surprised by it. What's your reaction, though, to the Bucks and Doc Rivers moving on from each other?
Yeah, not surprising at all here. This feels like both parties were ready to part company, right? He goes 32-50 this season. He said, I thought we'd be better. He was pretty much the only one. Maybe there were a few other people in Milwaukee who thought that they were going to be better. Yes, it was an absolute disaster this season because of the whole Giannis injury situation. Are they going to trade him or are they not going to trade him? But that's just not a good Bucks team now. I don't put all of that on Doc, but some of this is on Doc, right? Because over, 2 and change seasons, a little less than 3 seasons because he took over midway through his first year, he finishes 97-103 in Milwaukee. No playoffs this year, 2 first-round exits, and now all of a sudden the Milwaukee Bucks are paying out 8-figure salaries on his final year. This feels like a teardown and rebuild once they finally come around to the realization that, yes, it is time to move on from Giannis Antetokounmpo in the offseason. I think Doc saw the writing on the wall and went, I don't want anything to do with this. And Milwaukee looked at him and went, you know what, that's cool because we don't want anything to do with you anymore either, so let's all wash our hands of this and go our separate ways.
What I'm really curious about, John, is Adrian Griffin gets fired when the team is 30-13. They are 30-13, and we know there can be things that happen behind the scenes that not everybody sees despite a great record. How bad does it make the Bucks look now that they fired the guy who replaced Adrian Griffin when the team was doing pretty dang good?
Yeah, it doesn't look so good, right? Adrian Griffin out there right now having a celebratory toast, putting his pins into his Doc Rivers voodoo doll. He's having the last laugh on this one. And look, Milwaukee has really mismanaged the organization for the last several years, up to and including when they decided to move on from Adrian Griffin when they were winning games. And they bring in Doc Rivers, who, despite the fact that he won a championship with Boston, that was a long time ago. That was 2008. This is 2026, right? I mean, I asked people in Los Angeles with the Clippers what Doc Rivers did for him. Never got out of the second round. Asked people in Philadelphia what Doc Rivers did for them. Never got out of the second round. So then on top of that, not only were they mismanaging the whole, like, let's bring in Doc, he's certainly going to fix things situation, but then Damian Lillard blows out his Achilles. Instead of just sucking it up and deciding to rip this thing down and start over, they decide to waive and stretch him so they can bring in Miles Turner, and maybe that's going to appease Giannis, and maybe that'll make them a good team. Nope. And now they've got all this dead money on their books going forward. And on top of that, they're right back where they would have been anyway, which is staring at a situation where they're probably going to have to move, almost certainly going to have to move on from Giannis this offseason. So look, they won that one championship. That was a pleasant deal for Milwaukee and for the Bucks, but dark days ahead in Milwaukee.
So you brought up Giannis Antetokounmpo, right? And you feel like it's inevitable that the Bucks and him are going to move on and they're going to find a different team for him to play for. But do you think, like, it even matters what Giannis thinks about this move? Or is it like, yeah, Giannis is going to be gone too, so it really doesn't matter if it was going to be Doc Rivers going or somebody else?
Yeah, I think Giannis doesn't care if Doc Rivers is the coach or not. And look at the situation that Giannis is in now, right? Because before, I know he's trying to maintain his reputation. He doesn't want to sully it at all. But right before the trade deadline, after being told all season, really, that the Bucks were not interested in trading Giannis Antetokounmpo, all of a sudden the Bucks were dangling Giannis Antetokounmpo, and they're not going to do that unless they've at least had some conversation with Giannis's agent about, hey, maybe we should kick the tires on what might be out there. Now, ultimately, they decided not to move on, and so they go into this offseason in the same situation. But right before the season ends, Giannis is saying, hey, I'm healthy. I want to play. I've never been in this situation where the organization is telling me I can't play. And he then urges the NBA to investigate his own organization, Chris. At that point, I think it's pretty well on the table, and everybody knows that the writing is on the wall that this thing is over. You don't call for an investigation into your own organization if you think you're coming back next season. That's one of those things where you're burning all the bridges behind you and saying sayonara on your way out the door. So, yeah, I think that this is a thing where Giannis knows that Doc was going to go. He knows that he's probably going to go, and the Bucks are looking to move on from everybody.
Yeah, when you do that, it's a really, really nasty sign, right, of how bad things have gotten. Now, with Doc Rivers, he's a Hall of Famer, John, okay? You can't take that away from him. I can't take that away from him. He won that championship in '08 with the Celtics. How do you view him all time when it comes to really great head coaches? Because he did win that championship, but we've also seen him really not maximize some teams that he's had.
Yeah, I mean, you see him on the most career wins by a head coach list, and when he's on a list with coaches like Greg Popovich and Don Nelson and legends of the game, right? Lenny Wilkens and Jerry Sloan and Pat Riley. These are all like esteemed head coaches, guys that are universally revered. I don't know that Doc is in that same situation, even though Doc would very much like to put himself in that same conversation. There was that leak story where they had the team meeting and Doc was saying to guys, hey, you should look up my resume. You should Google me. Well, I got bad news for Doc. When you're urging your own players to Google you, something has gone amiss, right? And I keep coming back to, yes, he has that championship from the 2008 Celtics. I'm not sure that a replacement level coach couldn't have won that with that roster because that team was that good and they were on a glide path to that championship. And then after that, what else has he done, right? I mean, not to say that he hasn't had a good career, but a lot of that is just longevity because I remember covering him here in Los Angeles when he was with the Clippers and talking to him about that team and saying, well, when are you going to get out of the second round? And he kept saying, we will. They never did. Then he goes to Philadelphia. I thought it was a good hire. I thought that Doc was one of the best available coaches and that it would be a good situation both ways for the Sixers and for Doc Rivers. Turned out not to be. Again, did not get out of the second round, and that's sort of a theme with Doc Rivers. And it was even worse for him in Milwaukee, where they replaced Adrian Griffin, where they basically empowered Doc Rivers, who was then sort of like an advisor for the front office with the Milwaukee Bucks. Hey, why don't you go out and find us a new head coach? Oh, isn't it convenient that he landed on himself as the best option and then was under 500 in 2+ years with the Bucks? So look, he's had a great career. Credit to him for being a Hall of Famer, but I wouldn't put him. We were just talking before we came on if he was a top 15 coach of all time. Well, we ran through the first 14 pretty easily without me going, I'd take Doc over that. So I'd have to see who's after him. But again, he's had a nice career. Now he gets to go off and golf and be an announcer or whatever comes next for him.
You said he's going to go out and golf, maybe announce. So you believe he's coached his final game as an NBA head coach, or could there be more on the table for Doc Rivers in the association?
Well, the NBA tends to be an old boys network, right? Where like the same guys get recycled through, and Doc is a very popular person in the NBA. I will say this about Doc Rivers. He's like one of my, you want to talk about like top 5, whatever. He's one of my top 5 interviews of all time. You want a great story, you want to laugh, you want somebody to hang out with and fill your notebook, or you and I have something to talk about when we're on HQ. Doc Rivers, top of my list. If I own an NBA team and I need a head coach, Doc Rivers probably not on my list. Now, that doesn't mean he wouldn't necessarily be on somebody else's list. I think more likely he takes some time off. He goes and golfs. Maybe he does ride off into the sunset. Maybe he gets back into broadcasting. But you never know. Like, look what happened with Milwaukee, right? I didn't think it was that unattractive of a situation, even though they had a winning record and Giannis and a healthy Dame at the time. But they dangled that shiny object in front of him, and they got him out of that broadcast booth. So enough money. You put enough money in front of Doc Rivers, could happen again. But if I was Doc, I would say thanks for the time in the NBA. It's been real. I'm going to go and put my feet up for a while.
Hey, yeah, and I wouldn't blame him, right? He's made a lot of money. You know, he's won a championship, and people can say a lot about him. Some of it justified, some of it not. But at the end of the day, he's a Hall of Famer, and he's won at the highest level. For the Bucks, it's a long ways away, John. But is there any chance that when you talk about them finding their next head coach, they include Giannis? Like, how do they go about this search to make sure they get it right this time, depending on whether Giannis is going to be there or not?
My suspicion is that whatever coach they bring in, it's going to have to be somebody who's really looking forward to a rebuild, right? Because this feels like a teardown. Even if you have Giannis, let's say for the sake of argument that you have Giannis moving forward and okay, he's still going to be here. Well, what kind of Giannis are you going to have? Are you going to have an engaged Giannis, or you're going to have a Giannis who's excited about being on a team that like wasn't very good this season and doesn't have many very good players? And oh, by the way, yes, they have a pick in the upcoming draft, but it's the worst between their pick and the Pelicans. So we'll see where that falls in the lottery. But I don't see a lot of ways for John Horst, the general manager, to really materially make this team a better team unless they go out and get a big haul for Giannis Antetokounmpo. So if that's the case, if you do have to in fact move Giannis, then whichever coach you're bringing in, you're not getting a big name to come in here and win now. This is one of those situations where I think back to Brett Brown when they were in the process years in Philadelphia with the 76ers. You're going to have to get a guy in here who is patient, who wants to work with young players, who wants to do development, and who realizes that this thing is going to be a build back up from the ground level, and it's going to take a long time for the Bucks to get back to a level where they were when they were winning a championship with Giannis. Those days are in the past. The future for them is all about starting over again.
Yeah, there will be no instant gratification for this Bucks squad if Giannis indeed does leave, which seems likely at this point in time. John Gonzalez breaking it down as Doc Rivers gone as the Milwaukee Bucks head coach. Appreciate you, man. So here is how Rivers did in Milwaukee. Fired after 2.5 seasons with Milwaukee. 2 playoff appearances, but 0 series wins. Went 32-50 with Milwaukee this season. Second time in his career losing 50 or more games. The other time happened the 06 season with the Celtics.